Fantastic. Well, first of all, let's just say happy Wednesday. Today is May 17, 2023. We want to welcome everyone that is joining us this morning. We're going to go ahead and give it a few more seconds while a couple of more individuals are logging on. So I just want to say, on behalf of the California Placement Association, we want to thank you all for being here, for making the time to join us. And we want to also thank you for putting your videos on so we can actually see you. Fantastic. This is great. I'm Rosalinda Rivas. I was the former president of the California Placement Association. I'm happy to be here today on our workforce webinars. And I want to also share a couple of board members that are with us today, and they could kind of introduce themselves and kind of share what college they're from. I'm with Moreno Valley College. I am the apprenticeship director here, and I'm going to pass it over to my left, and I see Greg. So Greg, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Greg Friedman. I'm the Vice President of the North. I work for Merced County Office of Education. Rosalind is my right-hand woman, literally, because I broke my wrist last week. So she's helping me out today. I'm going to let her do all the talking. I'm going to stay silent. But so happy to see all of you here. Really excited to have Ilana speak. And yeah, I'm going to pass it off to Jerry because Nisha. Hi.
Hi, Carrie. If you could introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry, I was writing notes. Hi, I'm Carrie Ave. I'm actually an employer rep for the Central Region of Santa Cruz with California Placement Association, and I am the CEO of CareerWise Consulting. I'm a coach, consultant, and corporate trainer, and I'm super excited about Ilana's presentation today. So I'm glad that those of you that are already here and the others that are still to come, you're in for a real treat. So.
Fantastic. Jackie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jackie Kennedy Harris. I am with JKH Career Coaching. I am also on the board. I represent the Northern Region as the employer rep. And I'm glad to have all of you guys here. I'm excited about this presentation. And I'll pass it to Nisha.
Thank you, Jackie. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nisha Hill. I am the Job Developer and Placement Coordinator at Mount San Jacinto College. I also am on the board, and I am one of the educational reps for the South Region. Welcome.
Outstanding. And all this is actually possible because of our sponsors. And Greg, you want to share a little bit about our amazing sponsor?
Sure, I'm excited. Transfer Inc. or Transfer is our sponsors. They have taken training to the whole next level for our students and clients by using virtual reality. They literally have the Oculus goggles. And if you want to learn how, or you're teaching students how to become medical assistants or do welding or paint cars or auto repair, they throw on the goggles. They actually get real hands-on experience with coaching before they actually go out onto the internship site or externship site. So super exciting. We all know computers are the wave of the future with AI and everything else, and this is just part of it. So we thank Transfer for sponsoring our webinars and CPA.
Yeah, that virtual reality, those goggles, they're not really like goggles as you think of swimming goggles, but those goggles are that they use for virtual reality, and the different curriculums that they're building now is incredibly innovative. So excited that they're with us and sponsoring us. And so we have them to thank. And I'll drop their chat. I'll put in the chat box their website link if you're looking to explore and just curious to learn a little bit more about them. And then if you do connect with them, let them know you learned about them through the California Placement Association and thank them for being my sponsor. Without any further ado, I really want to excited to introduce Ilana Levitt. Yay! She's going to be sharing with us today on the topic of our career struggles hereditary, I should say. So without any further ado, Ilana, I'd like to pass you the baton.
Thank you. And thank you all for having me. I am on East Coast time. It's great to see you all. This is a juicy topic in career, right? Family relationships, family legacy. I would love for it to be interactive. There'll be time for Q&A. I'll be asking you some questions in the chat. You can raise your hand. You can take yourself off mute. If you would mind putting yourselves on screen, on camera, if you are able and comfortable, that is great because I love talking to faces. If you're not able, I understand. So I'm going to share my screen and thank you to Carrie. Carrie and I met at a career development conference last year. We connected, we were talking about this topic and she thought it would be great for your group. So just give me a little heads up or a thumb if you can see my screen.
We can
Okay.
see it.
Great. Okay. So we're ready to dig in. Let's see. So I'm not going to start with the book that came out. We're going to go there. So I just want to say, by virtue of my background, I am a mental health counselor. I'm a licensed counselor in the state of New York. I'm a licensed counselor in the state of New Jersey. And I am an HR professional. I work for a university that have been there for a long time doing organizational development, employee relations. And for 12 years, I facilitated mother-daughter workshops with my mother, who was a psychoanalyst, which led me to really thinking about women's issues and how that family relationship impacts women. After my mom died 19 years ago, I would ask my private clients who their role models are. And men would tell me in a second, this one, that one, real, fictional, through the generations. And women would look at me and say, what do you mean? And I realized that when I really thought about whether women of every generation have had role models, how their career development journeys look differently, how they deal with advancement in the workplace, how they deal with power, their self-confidence, all of this stuff connected to where we come from. So it led me to writing this book. Came out about 5 years ago, called What's Mom Still Got to Do with It? And it's a self-help career book for women. I know, I love the title, it's catchy. I'll tell you a little bit about the daughter types that I came up with. So really, I think of myself bringing you a three-legged stool of mental health, career, and human resources integrated into this talk about family. Okay, so that's just a little bit of background. So I know we only have an hour, probably less than an hour, 45 minutes. Part one, I'm going to talk a little bit about this from a career development perspective, and then I'm going to try to give you some resources and whatever kind of role you have working with clients that can really take this very messy, very big topic and boil it down to things that will help you and your clients. And of course, happy to answer any questions that do or don't fit into one of these two areas. Sound good? You with me? Okay.
Sounds great.
So let's warm up. How many of you have experienced your parents' words slipping out of your mouth? Yeah, okay, give me an example. Unconsciously, what's in there? Give me an example.
Foolishness.
That's the way the ball bounces.
Oh, yeah. Right? What else?
You want to get it done, do it yourself.
Great. So these things, these ideas that might not even be consciously ours, but they're in our bodies, right? And then they come out at the most unlikely times. And we basically have our parents within us, right? For the good and the bad and all the different. And it comes out. So, okay, so you guys are with it. We don't have to spend a lot of time. Who wants to tell me about this cartoon?
Kathy.
Remember her?
Remember,
Yeah.
Crazy Kathy.
So what's
funny.
what's funny about this?
I like her expression.
Yeah. So why is she looking like that?
Because her mom, all her mom had to do was look at her a certain way and she immediately felt a certain way, right? She where she
Yeah,
could
not
have been in
the
a good
look.
place at one moment and then it was, uh-oh.
Right? There's a certain look our parents give us when we know, like, uh-oh, we're in deep trouble.
Right. Or whatever it is, right? So career-wise, imagine if you're a child of any age that makes choices that are different from what the parents would approve, what values maybe your family has or does not have. It's not even like your parents have to really stand up and speak against you. They just have to give a certain look for you to feel a certain way, right? So again, I'm just building the case that this is within us. So now let's think about how do our careers progress? This is not a simple formula, right? We know that there's a little nature nurture thing, right? We're born with certain temperaments, we're perhaps born with certain interests, values, personality. Some of this is just innate genetically. Then we know about the Holland hexagon. We know that we have certain interests that develop. If we ask children what they like, they tell us what they like. You say to adults, what do you like? They say, what do you mean? Right? So we get kind of buried in life by what we should be doing, but we're not unidimensional at all. Then we have a little Myers-Briggs viewing up here, right? Personality matters. But then there's this whole thing called life that is like, I probably should have put the life on top of all these other things, not below it. But what kinds of things in life get involved in our career choices? What kinds of things? So we've got our go ahead, sorry.
Family.
Economic needs. Sometimes you just need to
Yeah.
get a job because you need to make money, or the college choices you make based on financial availability or economic
Correct.
resources or lack of it.
Yep. So there's a million things. There's a million things in this thing called life, but we just want to, again, show that I'm not blaming parents. There's no blame on parents, right? Parents did the best that they could do with what they had at the time. That's no question. And children and adults coming into career and in career want to do the best we could do. So I'm just trying to sort of show you the relationship and then how do we get out of it? So in my private practice, I'm sure all of you have seen in whatever kind of role you have, we see all kinds of successes and struggles with our people and our clients, right? We see career changers and promotion and rediscovery. We see internal barriers. What do I mean by internal barriers? Fear, depression, anxiety, all kinds of things that stands in our way. We see negotiations, leadership, teamwork. We see all kinds of positive things. And many of us have had very good role modeling for these kinds of things. We also see low achievement, people who are what I would call underemployed, right? They're not reaching their potential. Difficulty making decisions, bad reviews, conflicted relationships. Those are my favorite to get into. Politics, feeling stuck, work-life balance, right? We see all kinds of things in the workforce. And it will never be able to tell exactly what's connected to family, lineage, or not. So also in the mix, we have our parents' career and education, right? We have sometimes people feel like they can't surpass their parents, but many parents feel like they want their children to surpass them, right? Except for those parents who are threatened by their children surpassing them. That's very sad, but believe it, it happens. We've got critical incidents, right? An illness in the family, a loss of a job, a company that went under. These things are really unbelievably connected to people's even unconscious career advancement. I had a client who at age 54 just couldn't function anymore in the workplace. And we had to dig and really find out what was going on. 54 was the exact age that their father lost their job. And everything went down. The house became depressed. And unconsciously, he didn't think, how can I succeed if my father didn't succeed after this age? It's fascinating. But so much of this stuff is like under the surface. We have career shame and successes. And, who hasn't been laid off at this point, in 2023? So many people, but there's still shame associated with. Anthony, am I right? Right? Like the stuff happens, right? But people have so much shame around it, even though it's just so commonplace. Anybody have an idea what I mean by inherited family trauma? You can take a guess. We're all in the same association. We're all career helpers. There's no right or wrong. Anybody have a sense of what an inherited family trauma might look like?
Sometimes it could be a language barrier, having an accent. I know growing up, English for me was my second language, so hearing the remarks and the discrimination and kind of hateful comments made to my parents, because they spoke with an accent. And then myself, as I was growing up until, I don't know, I still kind of have a little bit of accent, but not as much, people say. But so that's part of it too. I would
Absolutely.
say.
And let's not just stop at the trauma. Let's just talk about discrimination, right? And let's talk about discrimination for many people, underrepresented groups, women, age, obesity, like we could go on and on in the workplace that you may have seen what your parents went through or may have experienced yourself, or you see what's happening in our society, right? So yes, that's all in the mix. And life scripts, what we tell ourselves, right, about our stories. So we'll talk a little bit about that. This is such an interesting quote from a psychologist. When our needs have not been met in infancy, right? Think about that. When something has gone wrong, when roles have been reversed, we can spend our entire lives trying to right the wrongs in our love lives, at work, and in our concepts of ourselves. I think that there's a lot of research in how, you know, people who have marriages that fall apart, how the way we were parented impacts our self-esteem. Not a lot has been written about the workplace, but there is research about early attachment theory, right? And how that impacts us in the workplace. I'm going to show you a little clip from a movie that's going to like show you exactly what I'm talking about. But sometimes when people have had really traumatic early childhoods, it shows up at work. So in terms of the book, just to give you a little perspective of what kind of model I came up with a model, and I'm not going to go deep into it, of 5 different daughter types. And this is relevant for men and sons too. I just happen to write about women, but that based on the kind of mother or parent you had, it transcends to different career issues, right? So it's just a framework. Some women read the book, they're like, I didn't fit into one type perfectly. But, you know, think about the daughter, the maverick daughter. Think about the employee who has to show up to work at 9 o'clock every day. And they're always late and they always have excuses like it was the train, it was the traffic, it was my kid, it was this. So they beg for a 9:30 start time. What time do they show up to work then?
9:45.
9:45. We all know it, right? Why is that?
Because now their new benchmark has shifted.
Yeah. So
And
why
the
can't
habits
they,
continue.
right? So why can't they show up at the right time? Anybody?
I don't care.
Well, sort of, yes. So I think they're always pushing against authority. These are people who don't want to be told what to do, right? Maybe they had over controlling parents, and you know, nobody likes to be told what to do, frankly. But as adults, we know we know we have to do adulting, right? Like we have to show up to work, otherwise there'll be consequences. But there are people who are perpetual adolescents, right? There are people who blame their problems on everyone else. There are people who are very high achievers and didn't have parents who are role models, but they're very high achieving, but still feel like a little bit of an imposter, right? And I think I could trace some of these things back to family matters. My favorite daughter type, the one that person type that sits close to my heart, is the bootstrap. These are people who maybe were children of immigrants or children of people with disabilities or alcohol. They pull themselves up by their bootstraps, right? And they're like, oh, I could do it and you could do it, right? They're type A. So maybe they didn't have the role modeling, but they did it for themselves. So I think we really think about all these different situations growing up and how it impacts us. Any questions about this before we move on? I know I just threw a lot at you, but it's really just to set the stage of how family and our legacy, how it matters. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So what are the impacts? Let me ask you this. Have you guys seen any impact in your work with people or your colleagues or in your workplace? Can you see how any historical information impacts people in the workplace?
Yeah, I definitely do. In some way or another with almost everybody that I work with. And the way they respond to things. It's like when you have a conversation with someone and then they take it completely different than what you put out there. And you're like, whoa, okay, let's break this down a little bit. Where's that coming from? You know, that's, you know, I just asked you to turn the light on, right?
Yeah.
That communication is greatly impacted. And when you go deeper in those conversations, then they oftentimes will say something like, you know, you know, the light thing is actually happening at work where people have turned off the light when walking out of my office and I'm sitting in. But, you know, oh, well, my parents always had me, you know, shut the lights off. If I didn't, they followed me around the house and shut the lights off behind me. There's always stories about their family, their siblings, their grandparents.
Interesting. Such a good observation, right? That because, and then people react as if it's personal. You want me sitting in the dark, like that's the problem in the workplace. We react as if there's nothing about the past that's happening and that they're being disrespectful somehow, right? And that couldn't be further from the truth, right? Maybe they don't want to get in trouble. It's sort of like the two employees where one's late every day and the other one who's there has to take over the work for the first one for the first 20 minutes. But the second one runs in so self-conscious that they're late that they don't apologize or acknowledge it. They just start working. And then this one's mad and they don't have that conversation. And she's like, can you just thank me? And, you know, everybody's in their own head about it. Any other examples? That's a great one, Carrie.
No, it's so funny you brought that up. I was having a conversation with a coworker of mine. She went from 0 to 100 on our new staff member. And so I was talking to her. And so then I'm like, okay, I said, I'm not sure if you've noticed this, but I said, whenever we have conversations, I said, and you're in the car driving, I said, anything that is in contradiction to how policy is, I said, you immediately shut it down. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's it. And I said, you know, it didn't personally make me feel bad, but I said, have you noticed it? And so then she's like, I noticed that I do that. And she's like, and now that I'm thinking about it, the way that I responded to him was actually my past triggers with the previous team member that we had. I said, I said, so what about for next time? I said, since being in the car, driving your son to school for those 15 minutes, if a work call comes in, how do you feel about ignoring the phone call until you get back home? Or if you choose to answer the call, let the person know you're dealing with the family management matter, and can I call you back in 30 minutes? And so she's like, okay, I think I'll try that. So a lot of times, going back to what you said, sometimes we have these blind spots we don't realize are happening at that moment. And so sometimes you have to take a moment, reflect, and hit the reset button for next time.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Anthony. And what you did is brilliant, which 95% of the people don't do, which is actually coach to correct the behavior, to address it and say it and name it and give someone an opportunity. Often we see this, we might be triggered or not, we might have power or not, and then we don't say anything and then it perpetuates, right? So good for you and good for her for hearing it and acknowledging it, which is also difficult to do, especially with blind spots, right? But some people will go, some therapists will go as far as to say that every conversation and communication is only 25% about the here and now and 75%, especially when things are elevated or get heated, 75% about the past somehow, right? So think about that. Sometimes when people react strongly, it's really not to this situation. It's unconsciously to that thing that happened. So it's just an interesting idea. So let's look at the impact of this a little bit. I want to show you this little video and I want you to watch for themes. What do we think is related to her past? And what do we think is related to now? And trust me, since the book came out, I've been watching thousands of like videos, TV shows, movies, but this one is like really powerful. Okay, we're ready?
So in your estimation, what are your professional strengths?
Well, I don't believe in improvisation. I prepare my cases rigorously. I'm on top of clients. I handle them well. I protect them from themselves. I prefer to work on a project by myself, but I can work just as well in a team if necessary. I work equally well with men or women, but I prefer to report to a man.
Why is that?
Many women find me threatening. Would I be reporting to you?
Yes.
So you'd have nothing to worry about then.
Why do you think women find you threatening?
I'm not in the sisterhood. I'm my own person.
I It's often this that you moved to and from this area several times,
I've gone wherever I've had to go to get ahead.
but you always return here.
This part of the world is as good as any.
Well, Elizabeth, your resume is very impressive. It's no secret you'd be a great asset to us.
I would not disappoint you.
If you wouldn't mind, could you give me some of your personal background?
I was born here in Los Angeles, and I was given up for adoption on the day of my birth. My mother was 14 when she had me, and that's all I know about her. My adoptive father died when I was 10. My adoptive mother and I are not close. My name, Elizabeth Joyce, is one I picked out for myself in junior high. It's my legal name now. I don't go by any other. I live alone. I have since I turned 17. I've never been married, and I have no plans to marry. I value my independence above all things. That way I don't have any expectations to fulfill other than my own, which are great enough. That's all she wrote.
Wow. What do we see here?
Yeah, she has no expectations because she didn't have a parent. Like her mom left her, so there's some expectations there. And yeah, no one's dependent on her. She's solo and definitely.
Thank you, Anthony.
I hear lots of undertones of abandonment. And so having to fend for herself and step up, like the bootstrap, like, picking up your bootstraps and just getting it done.
Totally.
You can certainly see that her whole family dynamic has been changed upside down. There's hardly no sense of belonging, not feeling included. So she's had to grow up very fast. There's an identity that she's formed for herself that works for her. And so she can't really relate to women because she hasn't had a presence of one to show her what that model looks like. And so she's kind of taken that and pretty much applied it to her whole concept dealing with female coworkers. And I've sensed, pretty much like she's more so isolated on her own little island. So it's like,
Yep.
I'm good. If you choose to pick me, keep me in my corner over here. Please only let the instructions come from you or my male counterparts, but no one else to tell me.
Yep. Thank you. So a woman like this, yes, Rosalinda.
I just want to make a comment. Something that stood out to me in the beginning, and I don't know, maybe it was I kind of took it like maybe an unconscious bias on her behalf, where she says she prefers to report to Ben, will you be my boss? And he said yes. And then she quickly said, then we won't have any problems, or something to that effect. There won't be any problems. And it just kind of like, for me, it raised a red flag. Like I just got that red flag, like ding, like, in other words, if I'm dealing with a man, I'm okay. She's not part of the sisterhood, And so maybe that unconscious bias of resentment with her mother, the mother, or women, because when she mentioned her adoptive parents, she only mentioned the father and when he died. So there might have been like respect, admiration for the male figure, but maybe not so much on the female side. And so the fact that she just kind of put it out there, then there won't be no problems. I was like, well, what kind of problems do you create with women? I was like, my brain was going in that direction. Like, what's this gender thing, But anyway, so that's just something that really stood out to me.
And I so appreciate that on many levels. So first of all, if we're in the world of recruitment, these people come into our lives every day, maybe with not so much baggage, but we don't know what kind of baggage. But we have to read for those red flags. Total red flag. I don't want to ruin the movie because I don't know if you're going to watch it, but I'll tell you there's some very poor boundaries between she and this man. Okay. In the end, right? So there are red flags all over the place. She's high achieving, but she is creating problems for herself. And we're going to hear things like this from people, and we don't need to know their whole history. You don't need to go in, but you could listen to your gut and ask yourself, what is this about? And what can I do about it? You can ask a probing question. if you're the HR person, if you're the recruiter, if you're a career coach, right? Tell me more about that. You can't say that on an interview, right? Like, so I think as the career professionals, Rosalinda's right. Like we hear stuff in the background. We can probe and we can help people based on that. Even people who say, oh, you're lucky you have boys. I have girls. Girls are difficult. What are you saying about yourself? We are women, right? If you're a woman, you're putting yourself down. We hear these things. And I think you're all right that, I would have really think twice before hiring her, not to hold it against her, but because she's saying things that are really inappropriate that do end up hurting her. And you are also right that it is about attachment. When you have such problematic early childhood things, you could have therapy and have it not impact you. But this is someone who doesn't want to depend. She's going to do it all herself. She's not going to be a good teammate, right?
Right.
And
I think
yeah, go
another
ahead.
thing too is, and I know that's coming from like a job seeker, she's seeking the position, but so I don't want to stereotype, but we all have issues, right? Human beings have
Yeah.
different experiences, different things that have occurred, some worse, that whatever the pendulum is, but even someone at a smaller scale where they say, oh, that's not that bad, the level that it impacts may be just as effective as someone that might have had a much higher traumatic under whatever that definition is, because of the way it's feeling and impacting that individual.
Right.
So I don't want to put a level to it, but we all have, as human beings, many human beings experienced, whether through our own experience or seeing the suffrage of others, that it impacts us as well. And so in this world of work that we're in career services, job placement, workforce development, working with other individuals, it's not only about others, but it's also about ourselves, and also being compassionate and empathetic and to others, in our workforce, with our colleagues, with our communities, with our neighbors, with anybody. Right. And so I think it's something just for us to be aware of.
Absolutely. We're all human and we've all had trauma, right? To varying degrees, but it's our responsibility to try to keep it out of the workplace. And I do think it's the responsibility of employers to balance compassion and accountability, right? And that's a really hard thing to do. But I think one thing we could do, like Anthony did, is point it out, right? Mm-hmm. Like, gee, absolutely. And also for a job seeker, we can provide coaching to say, hey, maybe that isn't the best interview answer, right? So here are some things that I've seen also pass through generations. Money messages, right? Issues over regret, power, risk, personality. There's lots of things that have been passed down. These are just some funny money messages that I have seen that people are carrying inherited. If this was a longer session, I'd play around with these with you, but people are coming in with all kinds of ideas about money. I know I talk to all my clients about what they want to earn, what they feel worthy of. Sometimes money is not as important as doing a helping profession. I think all of us work for government or nonprofit, higher education. We clearly value maybe other things in addition to money. Not saying it's not important, but it's balanced with other values. But our clients are coming into the conversation with lots of money messages. Did anybody grow up with any of these? And can you see how it impacts? Christopher, do you want to share which one, or you just want to?
It's kind of, what's interesting is that because my parents never really talked about money at all. It was like almost like a forbidden subject.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I had,
and that may make it uncomfortable for you to talk to people about money. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was my experience.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It is funny because, in my private practice, I ask people all about money in the first session, and people sometimes act like I'm asking them about their sex history or something, and it's just something that we need to talk about because I need to know what they earn, what their history is, what they want to earn, what they feel worthy of, how they grew up, and it really is interesting how people see money in the context of this. Nisha, were you going to say something? And I don't know, my glasses aren't that good enough. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
You did, thank you.
Okay.
There are a few phrases on here that I grew up on with my parents saying, money doesn't grow on trees, live within your means. So that those two stuck out with me.
Interesting. Yeah. I'll share this deck afterwards with you so you can sort of have these, but you can even use these as pointers with points to work with people. So, you know, what's interesting is that there's also research about inherited family trauma that changes your DNA. It literally changes your DNA, and how the Rwanda victims and children of Holocaust survivors, that it's in our DNA. And it's not that we can't change it, but we're literally wired by some inherited family trauma. Sometimes there's time perspective with trauma. You have family members saying like, handling things with regret, or just live in the moment, or just worrying with anxiety, right? So sometimes if we grew up in a home where there's past, present, future focus, it impacts us. We talked a little bit about critical incidents. This is such an interesting concept of a repetition compulsion. It's a psychoanalytic idea that we tend to recreate situations that we grew up with unconsciously. So sometimes we choose bosses that remind us of parents. Sometimes we become like, I sort of somehow become the middle child in every work situation. I'm making peace. I can accommodate. And it's because it's sort of the position I had in my home. So these aren't necessarily negative things. It's just that we fall into similar patterns because it's a familiarity, whether it's good or bad. We're familiar with how we expect to be treated, and we recreate these things. It's just fascinating how that works. Unconsciously, mind you. So these are some really painful quotes that some clients of mine literally heard from their parents and came into my sessions with me. And I'm like, oh boy, like we are really so rooted in where we come from. I mean, these things are like painful. One of the ones to me that's most interesting is if you are on time, you're late. Oh my God, if you're on time, you're late, then that means you're never good enough. Right? If you're on time, you're late. Now, if you're on time, you're on time. But think about these messages that people come in with. The third one, I had a client who wanted to be a therapist, but she was told by her father that she's like a dog with a bone. So if she's like a dog with a bone, how could she become a therapist? Right? These things are very deep rooted. I'm going to keep going so I have time for questions, but let me give you a moment for food for thought. Is there any explicit or implicit message about work, power, career, money, leadership that you took from your family? I mean, it's just something for you to think about. And what do you tell yourself as a result of that? I don't know if we want to get one or two shares on this.
One thing that I was always told is that anything worth having is worth working for. Which also for me, I think translated into, you know, always be working, always be working.
And guess what? Now you're always working.
Right.
Right? Isn't that interesting? I wonder if it translates also into work should feel hard. I see that from people. If work feels too easy, like work should feel hard. Yes, Greg?
No, not that. I think like my parents like were kind of workaholics. We weren't necessarily there for all like my school events and things like that. And I know I often stay late after work, and I try to do a better job being there for my kids. But like, oh, you know, work comes first and family's kind of second. I didn't, pick that up from my parents. That's so it's hereditary. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone else was about to say something before we.
Hi, Christina Lee. For me, I think I always, if you're a high achiever, I'm always looking, especially from my parents, to even say, I appreciate you, I value you, but I never get that. You know, it's like, this is what you're supposed to do. And so on you go with jobs and everything. I never felt like you were valued what you're doing. it's just a must, and you're doing it. And they're always trying that. One day they're going to say, oh, you're so good, Christina, but you never get that from them. And so you have to kind of like get over it. You're never going to hear it. And so you keep going. Yeah.
Christina, I hope you've not followed in that pattern and picked supervisors who see your value and can express it. And that must feel strange and also wonderful.
And just so you know, we do value you with CPA. We appreciate you.
It's hard. It's really hard when we think about how this stuff impacts us, but we don't just get over it, right? We don't just give it to ourselves. I think deep down, there's just always a yearning for that, right? Or a questioning of how good am I really doing if I'm not hearing it? Because it really has nothing to do with you. It really has to do with them. But as children, we don't understand that, right? As we become adults, we could begin to see things more clearly. But when we're children, we just process it through a child's lens.
So Ilana, I have a question then. So it sounds like the first step then is, this awareness, right? Where this is coming from, what we're telling ourselves, what those thoughts are when we have certain feelings and things. What if you don't have a supervisor? What if Christina has a whole slew of bosses or supervisors that never recognize her for anything? What are some tips to turn that around so that she can change? Like, I use some self-coaching stuff, but what are some tips that you have that can help us with our clients and even with ourselves, if we would, as we become aware of these different things, to turn that around to a positive? Now we have this awareness. How do we change the end result?
Carrie, that's a great question and leads me to the next 7 slides, which are all about how to, okay, how to undo this. But before I even get to those, because I do want to leave time for a Q&A, I think that very specifically, we all need broad networks, and no one person is going to satisfy all of our needs or at home. It's not one partner, it's not one boss, especially in this gig economy, mosaic careers. So associations, Christina just got a beautiful shout out from Rosalinda, right? We can find other mentors, we can find people to reparent. So I think mentors, I think mentorship programs, I think associations, volunteer work. I just started doing some volunteer work, which is extraordinary because of what they do. So I might get something from that I don't get at work or from my clients or at home. So I think we can't look for that in one place, but you're absolutely right. The first step is awareness, but we should all have very broad networks and be involved in many different places. It's the same for the job seeker. You would never tell people to apply for a job one at a time. Apply for a job, see if you get it. Then you don't get it, you sink into a hole, you start applying again. No, we have to have our energies in multiple places. So if we get rejected from one place, we have hope in another, right? So I think it's really wide. Okay, so knowledge is power, right? So we're aware of it. We repeat what we don't repair. So if we don't repair it, we're going to keep repeating it. So here, how do we instill hope, right? Happiness, opportunities, positivity, and encouragement for you and for your clients. Are we ready? And again, I'm going to go fast, but I'm going to share the resources. So one for your clients is be a mirror, not a parent, right? So if we start telling people what to do, they're going to put us in that role of parent. I tell my clients, even if I have things for them to do in between sessions, I do not call it homework. I do not want to be the authority. I don't want to be seen, because then they're going to cancel their appointment if they haven't done their homework, or they feel shame if they haven't done the career research, right? No matter what you do, if you are the career coach, the helper in placement, you are going to be in the position of authority. They need a job. You're the helper. You're going to ask them to do something. They're going to struggle. They're going to feel shame. So I think one thing you could do is sort of reduce your power by not using words like homework and not being the parent. It's really hard to do. I mean, I sure I don't do well at this every day and with every client. But if you could just reflect back, again, not to call on Anthony, but what Anthony said, using himself. Here, what I experienced when you did this is this, right? Or if you say to someone, for every hour you put it into the job search, you're going to be 1 hour closer to that job. That's just a fact, right? It doesn't matter to me if you become a plumber or a ballerina. I don't really care what you do. I just want to help you reach your goals, right? So you can try to be a little bit more objective about what you're seeing. That's tip number 1. Write down your questions, because then I'll take them at the end. Challenge the life script. You're going to hear people telling you their narrative. I always get fired. I never get a job. I always get to the second interview. I this, I that, right? These general statements. I'm shy. I don't interview well. So you want to try to address that, right? Point out that there's something they're telling themselves. And then, the unconscious is listening. Try to get them to reframe that, right? So it's sort of like, I always get these dead-end jobs. Well, what do you mean by dead-end jobs? Why do you think that is? What would a non-dead-end job look like to you, right? Try to just challenge the script as it's coming in, because whenever you hear all or nothing, I always, I never, it's probably just their feeling and not a real I always, I never, right? So you can play the role as, is that really true? Because people can repeat success. So even if they think most of the time, well, tell me about a time when you did get the job. What did you do then? So really try to pick up the successes and remember that people can repeat success. Okay, healing the brain. We want to try to replace trauma or bad messaging with new ones. We can do that. We can change DNA. There's a great video on changing the neural pathways. Any of you do yoga? Okay, a little bit of yoga. Well, anyone can imagine you go into a yoga position the first time, what happens? It hurts. What happens if you go into it the next day? A little less painful. We create a little more space for that new position. It's the same thing, right? You're just creating repetition around good habits and good thinking. So if at first someone doesn't hear what you're saying, say it again, say it again. Have them do affirmations, right? We can rewire the brain. Mindfulness is an incredible tool to do that. It doesn't have to mean you sit in an Om position for 15 minutes, a half an hour a day on a mountaintop. It could literally be, I can't tell you how many times post-pandemic, work stress, anxiety, depression on the rise, that I just have my clients and my coworkers and my friends, when you wake up, take 5 minutes and write down 3 things you're grateful for. Do it before you go to bed. Don't reach for your phone first thing in the morning. Try to center yourself. Literally 5 minutes a day can pull you out of all of the noise and really try to get inside your own head. It's not a lot, but you can really work on rewiring some of those negative things that are going on. This is probably one of the most powerful suggestions I have. Strength-based assessments. Some of them are free, some of them are $30. Use Science is amazing. I don't know if you guys use it. It's like a brain games aptitude assessment. It used to be hundreds of dollars. Now it's accessible to everybody for $30. And you do these brain games and it gives you positive statements and language for resumes, for interviews. It looks at your strengths and it converts it. It also has a Holland hexagon and an interest inventory embedded, and it links to 535 careers and shows how those careers link up with the aptitudes and the hexagon. So and that connects the Department of Labor. So when people don't understand how their things they inherently know they're good at, they often don't have the language to articulate what that is. It makes me cringe when people say they're people. I'm a people person. What does that mean, right? Does it mean you're a good listener? Does it mean that you can negotiate and navigate conflict? It can mean a million things. This assessment is really brilliant. It's designed for the 20-something-year-old, like the college kid, but I use it for clients who are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, because we're never too old to really have the language around our strengths. Clifton Strengths, I just did a fabulous team building with it yesterday in the workplace. For $19.99, I know I sound like an infomercial, you can release your top 5 strengths and then you get an email a week. How many of you have done Clifton Strengths yourselves? Oh my God, it's wonderful, right? It really gives you great language to understand what you're good at and what it means in life, not just at work, at school, at home. What I love about it, it also gives you the language that if any strength, what happens if you use any strength too much? Anybody have any idea?
It gets strainful.
Well,
Just kidding.
it also becomes a weakness, right? If you're someone who loves analysis and you analyze and analyze, you get analysis paralysis. You can't make decisions. If you're someone who's so good with people and you love this all day, I can't even get sometimes to executing the details of my work, right? Because I'm so far into my happy zone. So it's such an interesting assessment to look at your strengths and also look at what your strengths are tipped too much. So I really encourage you all to do it, test it out. You can recommend it to people. And then an email a week, you know, it's sort of like you get your it's like a fingerprint, like your unique strengths. And the Via Character Strengths is also free and it's wonderful. So there's a lot of things out there that you can point people to so they have the language of their strengths. And that builds confidence tremendously. You can help people with their own storytelling, keeping out the negative. When I'll ask people, let's practice going into an interview. People going into interviews thinking what? They don't think, what do I need to share? They think, what am I going to hide? So if you go into an interview thinking, I want to hide this gap, I want to hide this stay in this hospital, I want to hide that I took care of an ill parent, I want to hide, you're not thinking about what do I want to show. So I really help people converting that shame and hidden stuff to like, no, we all have beautiful strengths. What am I projecting? And all that family stuff, sort of undoing that in the moment and really showing how do I want to shine. I use PARs a lot. What's the problem you had? What's the action you took? What's the result you got? What's the skill you used? Having people prepare with a lot of their own career stories that they can share in an interview. So there's a lot of things you can help with. Just Google PARs. And then how do we make this stick? Because in the moment you could coach someone and then they walk away and they kind of, you know, it's like that old stuff comes seeping back, right? My clients always tell me on Wednesday, I feel great. I see you, I'm motivated. By Friday morning, I feel like crap again. How do I make it stick? Well, you have to work on really carry that awareness, that separation from the past. What am I telling myself? Having mantras, writing, journaling, mindfulness, all these tips can really help it stick. So here's some follow me. Again, I don't want to take time on that. What I want to do is stop the share. I just threw so much at you, and let's spend the next 5-10 minutes. I made sure not to book a 3 o'clock or a 12 o'clock for you. But let me open up to questions, thoughts. I have not been able to look at the chat at all. Can't multitask that much. Oh, you put resources. How great. Thank you. So let me hear your questions and your thoughts and anything else.
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself, everyone, and just ask the question. Or if you'd like, you could put it in the chat and I'll go ahead and recite them.
Yeah, this should really be like a 3-hour, at least a 2-hour talk.
I was fascinated by this. Super happy you're here. I was like, okay, like I work with a lot of HSA clients and I don't necessarily, like, I don't know their families. I know them and their kids, but I don't know their parents.
Can you tell me what HSA is?
Health, Human Services Agency.
Okay.
So welfare to work, things like that. But just listening talk, I'm like, I saw much more reflective of myself, my own family. There was a lot of stuff you brought up today. So I found it fascinating. You go, explains a lot. So
Thank you for sharing those resources. I did add it into the chat box for others to kind of look at, not that we're trying to make an infomercial, but I mean, when we do have good resources to share or to look at, it's always valuable to all of us to look and explore. So thank you for those resources as well. Can you share a little bit more about the DNA programming, how it's inherited? That was such a fascinating topic with the brain neurons and stuff. So
Yeah.
the genetic coding. So if you can share a little bit more about that, if I know we have a few minutes left.
Sure. I'm debating whether I can actually pull up a 1-minute video to show you. I think maybe I'll send it to you afterwards. So there's a book, it didn't begin with you, Mark Wolin. There's research at Mount Sinai that they actually took, you know, if you think about a woman who was in some kind of a traumatized situation, their eggs, it's the DNA, the trauma, and is living in their eggs, and then that egg births children, and then there are eggs in those children. So and through sperm too, like literally your DNA and the trauma is passed down from generation to generation genetically, right? So this is not just a psychological or a role modeling or a witnessing of things from our parents. It is truly imprinted in the DNA, but it doesn't mean we can't change the mindset and the thinking. So this book, it didn't begin with you, it didn't start with you, Mark Wolin. It actually gives you a lot of techniques to undo some of that stuff that may be genetically imprinted. And I'm not a scientist. I'm sure there's a little bit deeper, more sophisticated language, but that's the best I have.
No, that's great. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Let me take a look. I see something in the chat. Okay, Jackie put in the survey for the website. So if you want to fill out the survey. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question in terms of, you know, any tips that we can share with our clients also when as they're going through this. I mean, it's a discovery process. So as we're talking to them, we're working with them to try to help them get employed, get them past all of that. What is your best advice, since we have so little time, in a snapshot for them to be able to show up at work without putting that history on other people, without blaming, judging others, but being able to recognize, oh, this is coming from me, without having to have, you know, like Anthony had to talk to this person and say, hey, you know, did you notice this? What's something that we can tip we can give for our job seekers?
Thank you. And I think that's a great closing. And then I could stay a few minutes if anyone has other questions. So you're not therapists, right? And you're not going to claim to be therapists, and you don't want to be the therapist. So you're not in a role to solve the problem. I think the best advice I have is gently naming what you see, that your role can be to help raise awareness. So if you see something, like if they're late for every one of your appointments, you can say, you know, I can't help but notice that there's a lot of interfering factors to help you get here on time. I wonder how that has impacted you at work and how you think that may impact you on applying for jobs, right? Gently naming it. And through that naming it, hopefully raising the self-awareness, right? Or I've noticed if they tell you in there, I don't know if you take the job history or intake, because you might all have different roles, but I've had people who say like, yeah, I've gotten fired. I can only work for myself because I can't tolerate working for anyone else. Well, tell me more about that. Well, everyone I work for is a micromanager, right? Well, tell me more about that. Well, and often I see this with a lot of creative and entrepreneurs. I work with a lot of creative people, and they're like, yeah, maybe it's a little maverick child, but maybe you just don't like to be put in a box. Well, what can we learn from that? Maybe you need an environment where you're remote. And this is not a negative thing. I don't like to be told what to do. Like I always keep myself to be a 60% or 80% employee because I always want to feel like I have freedom, right? And so, you know, this isn't negative stuff necessarily. This could be very positive stuff. And that's what you could say too. How can we take this pattern that you're noticing and how can we make it work for you? Right? So really reframing it, like, because unlikely, unless you have years of therapy, are you really going to undo something? But like, let's notice the pattern and see how we can make it work for you. right? How can we get you more independence on a job? What are jobs where nobody's watching what you do hour for hour? I do a lot of that, right? Let me help you get your needs met, because if you keep putting yourself in this position, you're going to keep getting fired. So how can you have a job where you have autonomy and you don't have anybody breathing down your back? So I will often help people identify it and then find roles where you can really get your needs met.
Wonderful. Thank you
Thank
so much. And I know that we're 2 minutes over. So on behalf of the California Placement Association, we really want to thank you, but we also want to share a couple of things really quick in the chat box. There's a lot of information. Carrie's showing the book. Pop it up again, Carrie.
Carrie.
Pop it on the screen. There's the screen so you can take a good look at what it looks like. I think you put the drop link in there. Your profile is out for LinkedIn is also in the chat box. There's also a link. Let me kind of share really quick. We have our next speaker for next month. That is 5 Steps to Developing a Career Roadmap with Celine Schultz Perez, June 7th. I put that in the chat box as well, along with the Eventbrite registration. Please check it out. You could go into the 3 dots where the chat box is and just save all the text messages that are there, or the messages, so you can take a look at that. And of course, we could not do this without our sponsor. And Greg, please talk about our sponsor that we love so dearly.
Oh yeah. Transfer Inc. is their website. They are virtual reality training programs for hands-on learning. Learn all those CTE skills before they go out into the workforce, or to supplement your training in the classroom. Very cool stuff there. We're at our CPA conference. I'm sure they'll be this open year, but check out their website. We really appreciate them supporting CPA and all that we do. Like these webinars, so happy to have all of you here. I'm excited for next month. I'm at the Career Roadmap. She's a professional HR person, has her own company, and I think it's gonna be really fascinating to help our people build their career roadmaps.
Wonderful. And then if I can get everyone's cooperation, maybe get on the, like to take a photograph for LinkedIn. So if you can undo your cameras, love to see your smiles. If you're comfortable with just your screen name or your photograph, that's perfect too, whatever you prefer. For those of you that are here, I'm going to say, let's take a little bit of shine off of my forehead. Let's do our hair, right? Do your dab. And then bring the smiles on. We're going to do a thumbs up to everybody. So if I can get everyone's thumbs up on 3, you could do the love heart too. That's good too, Christine. I see that. I love the book. All right. And we're going to do, hold on. And I'm going to move this over really quick. And we're going to do this on 3. And 1, 2, and 3. Outstanding. On behalf of the California Placement Association, we really want to thank you, Ilana. I also want to share a couple of board members that we didn't get to give a shout out to. One of them is Sarah Rivas. The other one is our amazing president, Christina Lee. They're also on our board. Want to thank you both. Raise your hand, kind of shake it so we can see it. Okay. Christina Lee is with Goodwill Industries. We got Sarah that's with Antelope Valley College. We're all connected on LinkedIn, so thank you all for being here, and we wish you the best.